Hi, this is Irving Steel, and we are here on Local Issues. We are extremely fortunate today to have two leaders from a leading local nonprofit called Reliance Health. And it's an organization that does a lot of amazing work on mental health. It's an issue very close to many people in the community, especially right now over the last couple of years with the pandemic. There's been recent policy changes with legislation and pushing to have more support for organizations doing good work like what they are doing. And so welcome. We are so lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Carrie and Heather-Renae. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, we're happy to be
Thanks
here.
for having us.
If you don't mind, maybe you could just kind of introduce who you are and what your role is at Reliance Health.
Sure. So my name's Carrie Dyer. I'm the CEO at the agency. I've worked there for 28 years. Became the CEO in 2019 after a long history of a CEO who'd been there right from the start. So I had a great legacy to follow. The agency itself has been part of downtown Norwich and expanded throughout southeastern Connecticut to provide mental health services to adults. And we love it.
Great, thank you.
And I'm Heather-Renae Paul, and I started in 2010, so that would be 12 years ago. Started right as a service coordinator, or also known as a case manager. Mm-hmm. And so was in different roles, kind of grew up with the agency, and my values just kind of started to align, and now I am the development director there.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome, congratulations.
Thank you.
And it's great to have you here. And one thing that I was really inspired learning more about the organization was just kind of the story behind it of how it started. And Carrie, I don't know if you want to share just a little bit of a tidbit of how that happened.
Absolutely. So back in 1976, the Norwich Hospital had upwards of 3,500 people living on campus, and there would be trips downtown. And when a person goes downtown, there's not, if you're going to walk around, what's your purpose? What's your, where do you land? So there was a gentleman named John Morosky who was doing a social work internship, and he created what they called the drop-in center at that time. And it was a spot where people could feel welcome and have a purpose. And that then became what is now Reliance Health. It went through a bunch of iterations of Reliance House and just grew and grew so that there's a place where people could feel welcome, feel like they have a purpose, and be part of something bigger than themselves and bigger than their diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and with that, you've been able to grow by leaps and bounds over the time that you've been there, that both of you have been there, right?
Mm-hmm. A lot.
Yeah, and it's always changing, forever changing. You adapt to something, and then we have new programming, or it just switches within the agency. So you're always adapting, and we're really good at being resilient and change, for sure.
And a lot of it comes from the people who we serve, but also the people who work for us. So if you know that there's something going on, or there's something going on with your family, or you're in your community, we can then respond, and we have a close relationship with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and representatives such as Joe Courtney to say, these are the needs that we have in the community. How can we better serve in these different ways? So it's great. It's so creative, and it's so responsive to what the needs are. It's nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how Heather-Renae, you kind of mentioned the whole resilience aspect, both as an organization, but then you take that both to the people that you're working with to inspire them to have that same level of resilience.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Carrie, you were talking a little bit about some of the support from legislators like Congressman Courtney and others. Maybe you could dive into a little bit kind of your financing and how you're funded.
Yep. So our primary sources are the Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and the Department of Developmental Services. And there are always supplements outside of that. So there's some federal funding. Recently, we did partner with Joe Courtney to do a partnership for the next 2 years to do Recovery Coach, which is really, it's peer support. So people that are struggling with substance use, having a person who can self-identify and say, I've been where you are, I know what that feels like, and I can try to help you find a path out of that. And that's just been phenomenal. So to have Congressman Courtney's, sort of backing with that has just been excellent. And there are other things that we're reaching out for, because there are so many needs that we have that we're hoping to get more support around things like that.
And that's one thing I love is just using creative, new, innovative models like the whole peer support model. The shortage of actual trained psychologists and social workers in our country is enormous. I saw something estimated over 20,000 people is the shortage we have. 50% of American counties don't even have a trained social worker in their county. And so using a peer support model, maybe you could explain a little bit more, what is that? How does that work?
Sure. So it is a person who is in recovery themselves. So you've been there before. So you're able to say, this is the path that I followed to find my way out of this. And again, it could be, when you're talking about recovery, it could be an abstinence model. It could be a harm reduction model, which is a whole other aspect that we have a couple different programs relating to. But it's being able to connect with a person personally to be able to say, I get it. I know the language that you're speaking. I know the struggles, or I can relate to the struggles that you have. And then how can I help you and just talk to you like a human being and not, be someone who is talking down or from a different perspective. It's a very person-to-person centered model.
High levels of empathy, I imagine.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's very simple. It can be, we were just sitting with one of the recovery coaches, and she was saying it can be as simple as saying, let's just sit and have a coffee. And that sort of relaxed, casual relationship that develops then turns into the deeper conversation of how do we get through this struggle that you're having.
Totally, and I think it's so different than something related to physical health. You break your leg, okay, you go to the doctor, you get your cast, and you get fixed. However, with mental health, my understanding is there's so much stigma there.
Oh yeah.
And so if you are experiencing something, maybe you don't want to go see the doctor.
Right.
But then maybe a new model like this, you see a peer, they have empathy, they know how to support you and move you in the right path. It could change the whole makeup, right?
Absolutely.
I actually always say that, where I'm like, one of my goals in my position has always been, since the agency, starting with the agency, has been really to stamp out that stigma and to work towards that, to be able to have a conversation just like, I broke my leg and I'm going to the doctor. Okay, I'm not feeling well, or I'm not, I need a little bit of support. And so, I'm feeling a little anxious or depressed. So being able to have that conversation that is comfortable and natural, just as much as, physical situation going on.
Totally. And
Yeah.
I studied public health. I have a master's of public health from a school of psychology. And one thing that we push a lot in that whole program and in my learning was preventative care.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just as you said, when you first start having those anxious thoughts or depressed feelings, or before it really exasperates into something much worse, then you can go and you can connect with your peer or connect with somebody. It can make a huge difference.
For sure.
Definitely. And even as caretakers, we have to look at that and say, how do you not get in so deep that you become the person then who's starting to struggle and starting to have those things? So being able to be like very self-aware and making sure that you're not, overextending yourself, because then you're not helping anyone. You're needing to then take care of yourself too.
Totally. And I imagine from the financial perspective too, talking about the congressman and other people, a reason why they might really like to support this kind of model is studies show people with mental health issues cost between 2 and 3 times more to the overall healthcare system, which is enormous. It's about 20% of the American GDP, gross domestic product. And so having models like this can really help our country save money, that we can funnel more money maybe into education or into public transportation, these other issues that we also care about.
Definitely. And benefits everyone.
And benefits everyone.
Yes, because when a person's feeling better, they might go back to school, they might go to work, they might do these other things, and build other relationships that then supports having children and schools, and it becomes full circle.
And be strong contributing members of society.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And so with this peer model and the other models you work with, can you talk a little bit more detail? Is it kind of face-to-face? You said like meet for a coffee or something like that? Or what does it kind of look like?
We just meet people where they're at, right? So it's you come in, and it could be, some people want to meet in the home, other people would want to meet and come to the office, or go out because they are comfortable at Dunkin' Donuts and just sitting down and being able to have that conversation. And it's all person-centered, so it's not us dictating what we're going to be doing to help the person. It's really, what are their goals, what are their life goals, and how can we help them get there.
Okay. Yeah. And then how do you take that to the next step? How do you kind of measure it? How do you see, is it progressing? Is it working? Is it not?
So each program is very different. It all depends. It depends on the funding, but also there's different models in each of our programs. So some of them are followed like on a fidelity scale. A lot of them, like I said, person-centered. So we do a lot of goal planning and kind of breaking, okay, what's your overarching goal? And then breaking that down, just like we would in any situation, right? You have this goal, but how do I get there? And so just having those conversations, and then we match that up with the goal plan and kind of reassessing that at a certain time, like every 3 months. Okay, how are we doing? Or are we working towards it, or do we need to adjust it? But it's all driven by the what we call members. Not clients. So.
Okay, great. It almost seems like another level of accountability, support, almost like coaching kind of model is what it kind of sounds like.
Very much.
Yeah.
And some of it's easier to measure than others. So if you're doing homeless outreach and someone's living under a bridge, the goal is to try to help them, if they want it, to try to find supportive housing. And so when you have a roof over your head and you can take a shower and you have control over your space, then you can focus on everything else. And so that's an easy one to measure. Can someone have a secure home to live in where they're feeling safe? Some of the others are harder to measure.
Right.
How do you measure a social goal where someone who maybe didn't want to leave their home all that much can now come to what we have, it's called Teamworks, it's a social clubhouse. And if they come out maybe once a week, then that's a success. And so those are smaller measurements, but with someone who has a chronic and persistent mental health diagnosis, that's a big step.
Right, yeah.
And I think it wasn't a trick question asking about how to measure these things.
But then that comes into funding, right? Yeah. So that it all correlates for sure.
Because I think that's one of the tricky parts with mental health is that it isn't so kind of 1 or 0. There's a lot of middle area. If you're experiencing maybe diabetes or something along those lines, you go and you test your A1Cs and you see very clearly what the number is.
Right.
But what are you? You take a PCLM test or a PHQ-9 and it's a lot of subjective questions and tests to get those data.
Right.
And we definitely have some assessments, that are built into different programming that is helpful and can give us a lot of information. But really, it's always the focus of the member and how are they doing? Just meeting them where they're at that day. And then we all ebb and flow. So
and life fluctuates. So you introduce a pandemic, and suddenly life is different for someone, and what their needs are might change. And so it's being flexible, and hoping that the funders understand that and allow for that flexibility. And we were talking about with the pandemic, you had to introduce technology, and not everybody is attuned to technology or has it in their hands. So it was doing a lot to secure that, and then do some training and get people comfortable with that different way of getting a support. It's a lot of adapting.
Yeah, adapting too, and as you just mentioned too, with the whole housing element, that I believe Freud might have been the person who said you need work and relationship, and if you don't have that, then it's called crisis. And if you don't have housing, the most basic element, it's really hard to get a house, to get employment.
Right. Or build a relationship.
Relationship.
Although you'd be surprised, communities they're homeless, man, there's some serious relationships, and people rely on each other. And I think that's the crux of it, is everything is about relationships. Everything we do is built on the foundation of having a relationship, having trust, and respecting a person, and then kind of moving from there, like Heather-Renae said, what are their goals? What is it that they'd really like to accomplish, and how do we help them get there?
And it's estimated that the strongest correlation between an outcome with a therapist or outcome with a social worker is actually, just as you said, Carrie, it's that relationship. If you believe in the person, if you have that strong relationship, you're going to move along a little bit better. I always love the analogy back to sports. I've done a lot of sports that if you love your coach, you're going to go to that extra workout on the weekend. You're going to wake up early in the summer and go for that long run. You're going to do all of that extra stuff.
That's right.
Yeah,
and Carrie, you talked a little bit about the pandemic, that for better or worse, I think has shined a spotlight on exactly what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think it's become more acceptable to say, I'm struggling. This is tough. I'm lonely. I'm by myself, or my life has changed. My job has changed. So in that way, there's that benefit. But then there is the loneliness and the other side of it, where people are feeling more isolated, or things have changed to the point where they don't know how to adapt to it. That's been tough.
Yeah. We've seen definitely an uptick, and I think I've repeated it like 500 times of just definitely, I think everyone was touched in one way or another with some form of experience of a mental health symptom through the pandemic, whether that's the smallest bit of anxiety or the smallest bit of depression or the smallest bit of isolation. And like you said, those aren't great things, but it definitely has helped with shining a light and a little bit more of better understanding of what other people are going through. Yeah.
I'm really curious how some of these recent legislative changes have potentially impacted some of what you guys are working on,
There's been
if
some,
at all.
Yeah, so there's some focus on kids' mental health, which I think is way overdue. There, because our focus is adults, so we get the end result of whether or not kids have a good mental health treatment process throughout. So that our focus has been really a lot on the adult side of things, the Department of Corrections and the way things are running there, and the things that we can do to sort of, be part of that, and the recovery piece. That's just been tremendous. So yeah, I think if you can catch things early, then maybe it's a little like you were saying about being preventative. Like if there are tools that you can put into the hands of a child as they get older, and they can, have a life that's maybe a little bit different than someone who didn't have access to those tools.
Well, a unique piece too is a lot of our members are parents, and so some of the things that they're being taught or that we're working with in their lives, their goals, is interesting that it can be trickled into the lives of the kids. Another legislative piece is just that we do a lot of advocacy around funding and just the importance of our services as a whole, not just our agency, but in Connecticut. So we're doing that every single year just to kind of shine that light.
Great, and hopefully build more emphasis around what you're working on.
Yes.
Yeah, and education.
Yeah. And to your point exactly with the children, Carrie and Heather-Renae, how you're saying that so much of our brains are kind of forming at this time. And I feel like recently there has been an increase of social emotional learning and these things in our school systems that maybe 15, 20, 30 years ago there wasn't that much.
Right. And there's a lot of, so much is done online now too. And, bullying's always been a problem, but when you start to throw in things like social media and the ability to sort of hide behind something, that adds a different element, and that's really impactful for kids, as you said, as they're forming opinions and trying to decide like how to respond to other people. Like that adds a whole different dynamic to the picture, and that's difficult to, as a parent, it's difficult as a child, it's a whole, cultural element to be working with.
Definitely, and there is so much emphasis on the online, the social media, all these different things that I was really impressed. I saw your uncle's house in Norwich, one of your buildings, and I was just impressed. I won't mention his name, but I saw someone walking around outside, and they were just so appreciative because I guess on the weekend someone was going to take a group of them out fishing for kind of an outdoor nature activity, kind of building that community. Then they were talking about Taco Tuesdays or something like that, and it's like building that positive, supportive community that isn't sending a tweet out.
Right. It's not.
And those are the little things. Those are really the little things. Like we've talked so much this year just about what brings people joy, and that is really like such a core thing, right? What brings you joy, because then from there it can be expanded into so many other avenues of your life. And that fishing trip it's not, it's fishing, but it can be I'm now having a really great conversation. I'm out in the environment. It's a beautiful day in the sun, all of that. So it goes far.
And it goes far too, I think, with how you take things and how Carrie takes things, that you guys are genuinely caring, optimistic, and you love what you do, and that exudes itself upon all your members.
Definitely.
And they can feel that.
The word genuine is absolutely like key. That if you genuinely care about someone, then that translates. That just does so much. And like Heather-Renae said, there's so much that's outside of our control. So what we try to do is say what is within our control, and how do you express joy? How do you make a memorable moment? A group of people, you mentioned the fishing trip, a group of people who had recently been homeless they chartered a fishing boat and created this memory that will stay with them. They will have that forever. And now they're connected with this group, and they've been given this opportunity to have an experience that you wouldn't traditionally think of as a mental health experience. And I think that's the point, it's yes, people are there because they have a mental health diagnosis and whatever else comes along with that. But the point is what really moves you, like what lights up that fire within you, because then once you do that, then the other stuff kind of falls into place. And that's really what we're about, is having that sort of joyous experience to then lead to all of the other stuff that's necessary.
I'm super curious, how do you help them to discover that?
Some people it's easy.
Yeah.
The Patrick example, if you want to talk about.
Yeah. Wait, can you clarify the question for me? Sorry.
Carrie was talking about how we find this joy, and if we can find this joy, kind of sparks it and changes everything else.
I'll explain actually, because we just did a First Friday event that we do monthly, but we just started it after the pandemic. So there was a member, Patrick. He passed away throughout the pandemic, but prior to, we were working with him. He had some pretty significant mental health stuff going on, and he wasn't leaving his home. His partner passed away, and we got connected with him, and we just started going into the home, and we asked him, what do you like to do? And he really loved art, and so we just started bringing art supplies. We would spend the time talking and chatting, and because he wasn't talking really to too many people, and we would make art. And so then after that, okay, can you bring some more supplies? All right, so then that started, and it got to the point where then he would start coming to groups. We'd bring him to a few, and from there he then started showing up at First Fridays, and he would start selling his art.
Wow.
And he always had like a resident table. Even if there was another artist showing his work, Patrick had a table there. That helped him get out of the community, he built relationships from going to these groups. He hung out with people outside of being in the group, outside of like our time with him, to the point he paid off all of his debt with being able to sell these pieces of art. And then after that, he would donate 50% of whatever he made during a First Friday to local organizations. The Soup Kitchen was one, our GSA, and then Reliance Health. But it was just having that simple conversation and then following through with that. Okay, you want art supplies? Cool, let's do it, and let's make this work. And it was huge. I mean, to have 150 pieces that are now in our gallery, and there's life in there. You can see these, you can kind of look at them and see, wow, you were expressing yourself maybe in this way, or maybe you were so happy on this day, or this really shows some struggles that you went through. But yeah, it's just having simple conversations and figuring out, what really motivates someone inside.
Straight from their heart.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that's a cool story.
Yeah.
That's a really inspiring story.
That's one out of thousands of just really starting with a conversation.
That's great. And I think there's probably a lot to be said with the connection between creativity and just unleashing overall happiness and health.
Yeah,
definitely. And we try to match that up. So one of the interviews you've done in the past is with Outreach. And so there are other organizations that we tap into, or other events. Rose Arts Festival is coming up. So we're trying to get people involved with that. And just using all of the resources, because we're not the end-all be-all. So there are so many other places that do great things in our community that we try to link and connect and make sure that, if there's a specialty out there, that we can find it. We have people who love pottery, and so trying to say, okay, well then how can you access that? Or if it's, a church that they're looking for, how do we access a church and how do you get there? What's the transportation situation look like? And trying to make those connections.
Not reinventing the wheel, right? Like what is out there in the community, because we want everyone to be successful in the community. So making sure they get connected with those resources that are out there, or different programs or anything like that.
Yeah. Totally. And that's one thing I love about your organization. It seems very collaborative, that you have your cup of tea that you're focused on, but Outreach, Becca Atkins, and their teams doing amazing work with art. So why not partner with them?
Right.
Are there other organizations that maybe you'd like to partner with that you aren't yet, or that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, so we're just talking right now with Children and Family. They're doing some development, and their focus primarily is children, but they're doing some work in adults. And we were saying that they think of us as doing some of the niche stuff. So we have 13 homes that people live in, and each of those homes has a different dynamic to it. So that's some of the specialty that we offer. So making sure that we can connect, especially to medical, to places that have medical, dental. That's a thing that we haven't really gone into that, because it already exists. So like you said, we don't want to replicate what's already out there and be redundant, because we want to be really responsible with the funding that we have and make sure that we can address the needs that need to be addressed, but find the places out there that are doing the really specialized work that we can partner with.
Yeah.
And what, in terms of some of these other modes of care, let's say BetterHelp is a kind of an online text therapy program, or Cerebral's been in the news a lot recently with the gymnast. do you work or collaborate with any of these organizations?
So we do. Our members have the choice to get services from wherever they want. So if they want to, say, have a therapist from a different organization, we help facilitate that. We also, though, have our own outpatient therapy, and some of it is virtual and some of it is in person. It really depends. And we tap in.
And it's all talk therapy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And there's group therapy.
And
There's we bring
EMDR, in. There's a bunch of different other things.
Yeah, they've done tapping. They were doing auricular acupuncture for a little while, and it's just testing all that out and seeing what the interest is, and if it's there, great, and if it's not, well, we'll find some other things to bring people's interest around. The Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services has been great at offering specialized trainings and holistic, looking at holistic care and how the whole person, your health impacts your body, impacts your mind. And what different modules are out there that we can continue to look at and expand into.
That's great. Still staying true to your core, but then also being open if there's other ways to kind of partner and expand.
Yeah. One of the partnerships too that I really like to talk about, because we got an award for it, but two, it's just really unique, is we are partnering with Norwich Police. So we're doing ride-alongs. Our recovery coaches get contacted when there's a identified overdose in the community, and they go out with the police to that person that might have that needs extra support, and they'll give a bag, and it'll have a lot of resources in there. It might have Narcan. It'll have a write-up of what we can do to help them, like a stress ball. But it's really to say, hey, we're here. We can help you in whatever capacity you need. Just give us a call or come see us, or we can chat right now. But that collaboration has been extremely helpful, with the police and us, and being able to physically go out and see people right in the moment.
Completely. Maybe that is able to kind of change the perspective of police in the community as well towards a more positive light, someone being there.
Right.
And we're both learning from each other, which is awesome.
Continuous.
Yes.
Yeah, every day.
And we just have about a minute left or so, and so I'd love to hear a little bit more. How can the community help you and your organization more? What support do you need?
Yeah, we were chatting about that. I think events, if we have any events and it's something that people are important, or people find important and valuable, and it's part of their values in life, come to our events and check it out. And the other thing too is we mentioned about legislative advocacy. If people want to advocate to their local legislators, definitely doing that throughout the year. Would be my two plugs. Coming and seeing that.
Yeah, and just being open to learning, because I think what we do is kind of quiet and silent, and most people don't know that what we do exists. So going online, learning about what we do, and then if it resonates with you, connecting to it. Like you said, go to an event. Just be nice to people too.
That was another thing.
That's the biggest thing, is
kind.
Smile at people when you go downtown, and just being nice goes a long way.
Right.
It sounds simple and silly, but it's true.
Yeah.
Some people say kindness is the new currency.
Yes.
It's true though, right?
Yeah.
And then there's so much more. You never know. What you see in a moment, there's so much underneath there. And so just being kind, and that kindness can start something,
Totally.
Cool. That relationship.
So how do we find you online? It's Reliance Health
Inc.org.
Yep.
People social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Yeah.
It's all
or
there.
Just call.
Yeah.
Call us. We have there's someone always answering the phone. It's not a message, so you can call and get us directly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing in the community. Really grateful to have you on the show today.
Thank you for highlighting, and doing this work too. It's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.